everybody. It is June 18th. It is Friday, 2021, and anybody else looking forward to the weekend? I certainly am, although it's been a great week for me anyway. My husband has been away on business, and I look forward to welcoming him home today. Ooh, that was hard to say. All right, well, when we left off yesterday, we left off with King Jehu just wreaking havoc on the area and the land. King Jehu was king of Israel, and he wiped out all of King Ahab and his family and everybody that he knew yesterday, and all of the Baal worshipers as well. And one other thing that he did was he took care of King Ahaziah. What? He's just like, I'm just gonna get rid of everybody that I want to. And that's exactly what he did. So when he killed King Ahaziah was king of Judah. King Ahaziah's mother becomes queen. So today we have our first queen, and we're going to read about her journey through her queenship, which will not last long. So if you're ready, I'm ready. My name is Bria Doan. This is Fit Your Ministries. We travel through the Bible one day at a time in chronological order during the year 2021. So we have seen so much adventure and just discipline and blessing and miracles. And we want to make sure that we keep track of the positive as well as when we're kind of seeing the negative part of the way that the people of Israel are living and the consequences of those choices and actions. So let's get on with it. We are going to be in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles today, just kind of bouncing back and forth. So if you want to take note in the show notes of what we're going to be reading and in what order. So we're going to be in 2 Chronicles chapter 20 through 24, jumping around though, and 2 Kings 11 to 12. But again, jumping around. So be sure to take a look at the order of the scripture in the show notes. All right? So let's get started. 2 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram and sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the royal princes who were about to be murdered. She put him and his nurse in a bedroom to hide him from Athaliah, so he was not killed. He remained hidden with his nurse at the temple of the Lord for 6 years, while Athaliah ruled the land. 2 Chronicles chapter 22, verses 10 through 12. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family of the house of Judah. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the royal princes who were about to be murdered, and put him and his nurse in a bedroom. Because Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram and wife of the priest Jehoiada, was Ahaziah's sister. She hid the child from Athaliah so she could not kill him. He remained hidden with them at the temple of God for 6 years, while Athaliah ruled the land. 2 Kings chapter 11, verses 4 through 16. In the 7th year, Jehoiada, sent for the commanders of units of 100, the Kerites and the guards, and had them brought to him at the temple of the Lord. He made a covenant with them and put them under oath at the temple of the Lord. Then he showed them the king's son. He commanded them, saying, "This is what you are to do. You who are in the 3 companies that are going on duty on the Sabbath, a third of you guarding the royal palace, a third at the Sur gate, and a third at the gate behind the guard, who take turns guarding the temple. And you who are in the other 2 companies that normally go off Sabbath duty are all to guard the temple for the king. Station yourselves around the king, each of you with weapon in hand. Anyone who approaches your ranks is to be put to death. Stay close to the king wherever he goes." The commanders of the units of 100 did just as Jehoiada the priest ordered. Each one took his men, those who were going on duty on the Sabbath and those who were going off duty, and came to Jehoiada the priest. Then he gave the commanders the spears and shields that had belonged to King David and that were in the temple of the Lord. The guards, each with weapon in hand, stationed themselves around the king, near the altar and the temple, from the south side to the north side of the temple. Jehoiada brought out the king's son and put the crown on him. He presented him with a copy of the covenant and proclaimed him king. They anointed him, and the people clapped their hands and shouted, "Long live the king." 2 Chronicles 23, verses 1 through 11. In the 7th year, Jehoiada showed his strength. He made a covenant with the commanders of units of 100. Azariah, son of Jeroham, Ishmael, son of Jehohanan, Azariah, son of Obed, Maaseiah, son of Adiah, and Elishaphat, son of Zikri. They went throughout Judah and gathered the Levites and the heads of the Israelite families from all the towns. When they came to Jerusalem, the whole assembly made a covenant with the king at the temple of God. Jehoiada said to them, "The king's son shall reign, as the Lord promised concerning the descendants of David. Now this is what you are to do. A third of you priests and Levites are going on duty on the Sabbath, are to keep watch at the doors. A third of you at the royal palace, and a third at the foundation gate. All the others are to be in the courtyards of the temple of the Lord. No one is to enter the temple of the Lord except the priests and Levites on duty. They may enter because they are consecrated, but all the others are to observe the Lord's command not to enter. The Levites are to station themselves around the king, each with weapon in hand. Anyone who enters the temple is to be put to death. Stay close to the king wherever he goes." The Levites and all the men of Judah did just as Jehoiada the priest ordered. Each one took his men, those who were going on duty on the Sabbath and those who were going off duty, for Jehoiada the priest had not released any of the divisions. Then he gave the commanders of units of 100 the spears and the large and small shields that had belonged to King David, and that were in the temple of God. He stationed all the men, each with his weapon in his hand, around the king near the altar and the temple, from the south side to the north side of the temple. Jehoiada and his sons brought out the king's son and put the crown on him. They presented him with a copy of the covenant and proclaimed him king. They anointed him and shouted, "Long live the king." 2 Kings chapter 11, verses 13 through 16. When Athaliah heard the noise made by the guards and the people, she went to the people of the temple of the Lord. She looked, and there was the king, standing by the pillar as the custom was. The officers and the trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Then Athaliah tore her robes and called out, "Treason! Treason!" Jehoiada the priest ordered the commanders of units of 100 who were in charge of the troops, "Bring her out between the ranks and put the sword to anyone who follows her." For the priest had said, "She must not be put to death in the temple of the Lord." So they seized her as she reached the place where the horses enter the palace grounds, and there she was put to death. 2 Chronicles chapter 23, verses 12 through 15. When Athaliah heard the noise of the people running and cheering the king, she went to them at the temple of the Lord. She looked, and there was the king, standing by his pillar at the entrance. The officers and the trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets, and musicians with their instruments were leading the praises. Then Athaliah tore her robes and shouted, "Treason! Treason!" Jehoiada the priest sent out commanders of units of 100 who were in charge of the troops and said to them, "Bring her out between the ranks and put to the sword anyone who follows her." For the priest had said, "Do not put her to death at the temple of the Lord." So they seized her as she reached the entrance of the horse gate on the palace grounds, and there they put her to death. 2 Kings chapter 11, verses 17 through 21. Jehoiada then made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they would be the Lord's people. He also made a covenant between the king and the people, and all the people of the land went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed the altars and idols to pieces and killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altars. Then Jehoiada the priest posted guards at the temple of the Lord. He took with him the commanders of the hundreds, and the Kerites, the guards, and all the people of the land, and together they brought the king down from the temple of the Lord and went into the palace, entering by way of the gate of the guards. The king then took his place on the royal throne. All the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was calm, because Athaliah had been slain with the sword at the palace. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign. 2 Chronicles 23, verses 16 through 21. Jehoiada then made a covenant that he, the people, and the king would be the Lord's people. All the people went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed the altars and idols and killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altars. Then Jehoiada placed the oversight of the temple of the Lord in the hands of the Levitical priests, to whom David had made assignments in the temple, to present the burnt offerings of the Lord as written in the law of Moses, with rejoicing and singing, as David had ordered. He also stationed gatekeepers at the gates of the Lord's temple, so that no one who was in any way unclean might enter. He took with him the commanders of hundreds, the nobles, the rulers of the people, and all the people of the land, and brought the king down from the temple of the Lord. They went into the palace through the upper gate and seated the king on the royal throne. All the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was calm, because Athaliah had been slain with the sword. 2 Kings chapter 12, verses 1 through 16. In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 40 years. His mother's name was Zibiah. She was from Beersheba. Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the years Jehoiada the priest instructed him. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burnt incense there. Joash said to the priests, "Collect all the money that is brought as sacred offerings to the temple of the Lord, the money collected in the census, the money received from personal vows, and the money brought voluntarily to the temple. Let every priest receive the money from one of the treasurers, then use it to repair whatever damage is found in the temple." But by the 23rd year of King Joash, the priests had still not repaired the temple. Therefore, King Joash summoned Jehoiada the priest and the other priests and asked them, "Why aren't you repairing the damage done to the temple? Take no more money from your treasurers, but hand it over for repairing the temple." The priests agreed that they would not collect any more money from the people, and that they would not repair the temple themselves. Jehoiada the priest took a chest and bored a hole in its lid. He placed it beside the altar on the right side as one enters the temple of the Lord. The priest who guarded the entrance put it into the chest all the money that was brought to the temple of the Lord. Whenever they saw that there was a large amount of money in the chest, the royal secretary and the high priest came, counted the money that had been brought into the temple of the Lord, and put it into bags. When the amount had been determined, they gave the money to the men appointed to supervise the work on the temple. With it they paid those who worked on the temple of the Lord, the carpenters and builders, the masons and stonecutters. They purchased timber and blocks of dressed stone for the repair of the temple of the Lord, and met all the other expenses of restoring the temple. The money brought into the temple was not spent for making silver basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, trumpets, or any other articles of gold or silver for the temple of the Lord. It was paid to the workers who used it to repair the temple. They did not require an accounting from those to whom they gave the money to pay the workers, because they acted with complete honesty. The money from the guilt offerings and sin offerings was not brought into the temple of the Lord. It belonged to the priests. 2 Chronicles 24, verses 1 through 16. Joash was 7 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 40 years. His mother's name was Zibiah. She was from Beersheba. Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the years of Jehoiada the priest. Jehoiada chose 2 wives for him, and he had sons and daughters. Sometime later, Joash decided to restore the temple of the Lord. He called together the priests and Levites and said to them, "Go to the towns of Judah and collect the money due annually from all Israel, to repair the temple of your God. Do it now." But the Levites did not act at once. Therefore the king summoned Jehoiada the chief priest and said to him, "Why haven't you required the Levites to bring in from Judah and Jerusalem the tax imposed by Moses, the servant of the Lord, and by the assembly of Israel for the tent of the covenant law?" Now the sons of that wicked woman Athaliah had broken into the temple of God and had used even its sacred objects for the Baals. At the king's command, a chest was made and placed outside at the gate of the temple of the Lord. A proclamation was then issued in Judah and Jerusalem that they should bring to the Lord the tax that Moses, the servant of God, had required of Israel in the wilderness. All the officials and all the people brought their contributions gladly, dropping them into the chest until it was full. Whenever the chest was brought in by the Levites to the king's officials, and they saw that there was a large amount of money, the royal secretary and the officer of the chief priest would come and empty the chest and carry it back to its place. They did this regularly and collected a great amount of money. The king and Jehoiada gave it to those who carried out the work required for the temple of the Lord. They hired masons and carpenters to restore the Lord's temple, and also workers in iron and bronze to repair the temple. The men in charge of the work were diligent, and the repairs progressed under them. They rebuilt the temple of God according to its original design and reinforced it. When they had finished, they brought the rest of the money to the king and Jehoiada, and with it were made articles for the Lord's temple, articles for the service and for the burnt offerings, and also dishes and other objects of gold and silver. As long as Jehoiada lived, burnt offerings were presented continually in the temple of the Lord. Now Jehoiada was old and full of years, and he died at the age of 130. He was buried with the kings in the city of David because of the good he had done in Israel for God and his temple. 2 Chronicles chapter 24, verses 17 through 22. After the death of Jehoiada, the officials of Judah came and paid homage to the king, and he listened to them. They abandoned the temple of the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and worshipped Asherah poles and idols. Because of their guilt, God's anger came on Judah and Jerusalem. Although the Lord sent prophets to the people to bring them back to him, and though they testified against them, they would not listen. Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Zechariah, son of Jehoiada the priest. He stood before the people and said, "This is what God says. Why do you disobey the Lord's commands? You will not prosper. Because you have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you." But they plotted against him, and by order of the king, they stoned him to death in the courtyard of the Lord's temple. King Joash did not remember the kindness Zechariah's father Jehoiada had shown him, but killed his son, who said as he lay dying, "May the Lord see this and call you to account." 2 Kings chapter 10, verses 32 through 36. In those days, the Lord began to reduce the size of Israel. Hazael overpowered the Israelites throughout their territory east of the Jordan in all the land of Gilead, the region of Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh, from Aurora by the Arnon Gorge through Gilead to Bashan. As for the other events of Jehu's reign, all he did and all his achievements, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Jehu rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria. And Jehoahaz, his son, succeeded him as king. At that time, Jehu reigned over Israel in Samaria 28 years. Oh my, what a roller coaster ride today has been. So we have Queen Athaliah, who attempted to take everybody out so that she could reign queen over Judah. And then she learns that Joash was saved, and he becomes king at the ripe old age of 7. So we know as a 7-year-old that there were other people that were helping him reign over over Judah. And those people could have been like his own mother. The priests helped. We meet Jehoiada, the priest, who really started turning Israel back and uniting the people turning Judah back, and uniting the people to serving God and getting rid of all of the other things and fixing the temple. But notice that when Jehoiada says to the priests and the Levites, like, you're going to rebuild the temple, they were reluctant. They didn't start rebuilding the temple. And it wasn't, we can see, they weren't listening to the king, they weren't listening to the priest, but it goes more than that. They weren't being obedient to God. I mean, it was God's call to repair the temple. Now, at the beginning of today's reading, we meet a woman by the name of Jehosheba, and she was Ahaziah's sister. So remember, this is King Ahaziah who was killed. This is his sister, who is also married to Jehoiada. So she would have been living in the temple, right? That's where the Levites and the priests lived. So it was a smart choice to hide Joash there, because Athaliah was doing evil things. She had no interest in the temple of the Lord. So Jehoiada was really, an amazing priest and follower of God who just brought this land back. But we notice that he dies after being priest for 40 years. He dies at the age of 130. I hope y'all all caught that one, because 130. And you're so hopeful, right? It's like, okay, yes, evil is gone, Jehoiada is there, and he's really showing them how good God can be, and like, look, you're rebuilding the temple, and y'all have peace, and all things are great. And then he dies, and Joash just changes everything. He goes completely against what Jehoiada was trying to do. But notice that it was the leaders of Judah who came to King Joash and persuaded him to turn. And they just abandoned the temple of the Lord. And King Joash started having idols and things like that. And then he kills Zechariah. He kills Zechariah because Zechariah was saying that he was not obeying God, and that because the people have abandoned God, then God will abandon him. And they didn't like that message, so they kill Zechariah. And his last words to King Joash was, "May the Lord see what they are doing and avenge my death." This is the NLT version. See, God is the only judge, and you have to know and believe that God sees what everybody does. God sees what you do, and there will be a judgment coming. Whether you or somebody else feels that judgment here on earth is only known to God. But friends, we are going to, every one of us who are believers of Christ and followers of God, will stand in his presence, will stand before God and have to answer for our choices. And now Jesus will be there and will step in and speak for us, and we'll read about that in the New Testament. But the idea is that you want to be in a place where you can stand before God and know, I have repented, I have done what I needed to do, I've done what I've been asked to do by God. I did my best to follow him all the days of my life. And the people of Judah and Israel both were choosing to turn away from God. And here it just doesn't make sense. Everything was going so well for them. And, sometimes even for us, life is going well, so we don't pray, right? Life is going well, so we don't worship God. We just go through our days like, oh, okay, life is good, life is good. Oh my gosh, life just got hard, I better start praying. So the idea for us is to be followers and communicators with God every day, whether in a good season or in a bad season. So Father, we come to you today in this season of our lives, and we thank you for the blessing, for the goodness that you have poured into our lives if we are in a season of plenty. And God, we thank you for being next to us, for holding us up when we can't, when we're in a season of want. You are the God of the hills and the valleys, of the highs and the lows. And you are in it all. And so we just come to you today to be in your presence every day, no matter the season of our lives, God. God, we want to seek you. We want to see your face. We lift our face to yours, God. And we just surrender it all. We leave it to you. We give it all to you, all our past hurts, all our current hurts, all our celebrations, everything. We just give it to you, and we just are so thankful for your grace and mercy that pours into those void spaces. We know that you are a God, when you remove something, you fill it with your spirit and your presence. And God, that is such a gift for us. And we thank you for that gift. And God, we just declare today is the day that we will seek you every day. We will seek you all the days of our lives. For our lives are a gift from you. And we thank you for that amazing gift and entrusting us in this life we're living. In your name we pray. Amen. Friends, I hope you have a wonderful and most blessed day. And I can't wait to see you right back here tomorrow. My name is Bria Doan. This has been Fitzroy Ministries.